talk about economics for our generation and what has that challenge looked like. Well, everybody told us, go to college, take on debt.
It's the best kind of debt
investment you can possibly make.
Yeah.
And that has proven to be not true. We have too many friends to count, and ourselves included, who have been strapped because of the student loans that we've had in our life. And it's hijacked our ability to experience financial freedom. That being said, we now, through technology again, have the ability to facilitate wealth at a new creative way than maybe previous generations could. This is the gig economy, crowdfunding startups. That wasn't even a thing like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Content creator and influencer space. These are great. Take those opportunities if they're available to you.
Welcome back to the Medicin Podcast. Everyone out there, we are so happy you are joining us. Myself, Mimi, you know me, and you also know my love, my partner. He's with me on every podcast adventure here. My love, Chase.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Medicin Podcast. I had my mind blown when, I think it was on Instagram, and there was this kid, he probably looked like a teenager, and he was telling people like he had found this absolute gemstone, this rare item. He was telling all of his followers to check out this vintage old school band called Blink-182. Like he'd never heard of Blink-182.
Oh, no.
And I immediately felt 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
And sort of went through the mental exercise of realizing that the way that we talked about like the Eagles and like classic rock when we were in high school. And, I would still listen to like AC/DC and the Eagles and things when you're warming, or like at the summer when you're warming up for basketball games and stuff.
You're very aware that it's old music.
You're very aware.
Yeah.
And you kind of have these moments when you're a high schooler where you're like, damn, some of this old music is like really good.
Yeah.
Like really timeless.
Yeah.
Well, that is happening now to the bands that I would have maybe like 3 months ago been like, yeah, Blink-182 is still doing it. Still cool.
Yeah.
So, I was anchored in my age. I don't feel old on a daily basis, but oddly enough, it's things like pop culture related.
Yeah.
Music, arts, it makes me feel like a dinosaur sometimes at 34 years old.
Or we walk around Coronado and we walk by a group of teenagers that
oh my God.
They look 13, but they're probably 17 or 18, whatever, but they just look so like, fair skinned and young and smooth, and they're using words like Riz or whatever, and like bag and cap.
Well, the one that got me was when we walked by a group of high schoolers who were clearly dressed in like a theme. They were going to a dance that was a 90s themed dance, which, dude, we totally did. When we were in high school and college, we were doing like 80s dances and stuff.
Yeah.
And they were wearing like jerseys from the basketball players that I watched when I was a kid.
Yeah.
They were wearing like, Britney Spears shirts and stuff, which is the pop stars that we grew up with. And we were like looking at each other like, shit, it has landed, people.
Yeah.
We are now vintage. I don't know what happened. It's like when you're in elementary, you think middle schoolers are cool. You can't wait till you get to middle school. When you're in middle school, you're like, I can't wait to go to high school. Then I'm going to feel, cool and old and relevant. High school, it's college. College, it's once I'm free and out of school. And then there's like a cliff.
Yeah.
There's like a cliff somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's at. It's like somewhere between 27 and 29. And all of a sudden it's like, whoosh, it's over.
Like, what's the tipping point from like your whole adolescent, you're constantly wanting to be older. What's that tipping point where now you're wanting to be younger? Like, is it 30s? Is it when your body starts to hurt?
I think it's when your body like catches up with you and you like you're frustrated by your digestion and you
have to take your pillow with you when you travel.
And you're spending way too much time on Yelp looking for chiropractor like reviews and recommendations. I don't know.
Oh man,
I'm not sure.
We recently traveled to visit Chase's parents at their place in Arizona, which is beautiful. But we were laying in bed one morning and I was just like, wow, I'm like really uncomfortable. I like fractured a rib in bed.
Yeah, rolling over.
Not anything exciting, y'all. Not anything like sexy here. This was literally just like I woke up from tossing and turning or something in bed and I was like, My rib took like a week to not feel like a stabbing pain when I breathed in. And I'm like, this is just 34? Right. 34 for someone who tries to take care of themselves like it's their job, you know?
Right. And to reframe all of this, like this is funny and we're joking. I don't feel old. I feel young of spirit.
Yeah.
I feel very motivated and driven to be productive in the world and to create a really positive environment for us and our family and the future generations. And that's really what the conversation is about today in so many ways. We are millennials, baby.
Woo!
We are born in the 90s. We grew up in arguably the greatest era of humanity of all time, 90s.
Can I just say, I actually love our generation name the most. Millennial sounds so much cooler than boomer or like Gen Z. Like,
yeah. I think we are Gen Y, I think is the way that it breaks down, like technically.
Well, I like millennial better.
I like it too. It's got kind of like that it captures what was really a really like funny and important moment in our life, which was the turn of the century, 1999 to 2000, and this sort of like 2000 thing that seemed so futuristic when we were kids.
It's got some like Xenon girl of the 21st century vibes.
Yeah. Well, today we are talking about millennials. And if you are not a millennial or you're closely associated with millennials, I think that's okay. We're going to be talking about things today that will likely be resonating, whether you're within the time frame that's deemed millennial, which I believe is like early 80s to mid to late 90s. You're generally, if you're born within that time frame, you're considered a millennial. But if you're outside of that and you're Gen Z or you're before that, you're Gen X or maybe even a boomer, some of these things will resonate today. And I get a little frustrated by the just very much stereotyping of generations because I don't necessarily think that I fall within a lot of the stereotypes of millennials and probably have more attributes associated with other generations and vice versa. I'm sure there's many out there. But at the same time, man, I really have found sort of the significance of what generational impacts make for people in our, communities. And it's funny because like as social media has really taken off in the last 10 years, especially, you start to associate with people that are across the world, across the country, in seemingly completely different environments than you are in. And while, yes, there is a ton of diversity out there, there are also a lot of commonalities.
Yeah.
And the shit that people say on social media about millennials, like some of the humor stuff, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I felt the same way. I thought that was my idea.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, totally. I thought of that.
And so I've really like taken a step back and really had to think about, wow, we are really shaped by a lot of things that are outside of our control from a real generational standpoint.
Yeah, totally.
And so it would be ignorant and immature of me not to look at some of the millennial stereotypes, look at some of the millennial challenges, and not find some level of reality in them.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great to think of these generations as archetypes.
Right.
There's the boomer archetype, there's the Gen X archetype, millennial, Gen Z, and beyond. If you look at the archetype of the mother or the knight or the king or whatever that we talk about all the time on this show, or even the zodiac archetypes, the archetype of Leo, not everything that falls under Leo I resonate with. And it's the same, with these generations. It's like 75 to 80% of it I do resonate with, but there's always going to be outliers where that's where our individuality comes in. We're not freaking robots yet. And so, just keep that in mind as we're speaking. We're going to be talking about stereotypes. We're going to be talking about, events that impacted millennials and how they shaped millennials. We're going to be talking about unique challenges and opportunities that are here for, yes, us millennials, but other people as well. This is not just all about millennials, but this is where we fall and this is where most of our listeners fall.
Totally. Today's conversation is about how millennials and maybe more accurately put, how the 30-somethings to 40-somethings are stepping into responsibility as it pertains to the shape of our world and how we can navigate unique challenges, which are clear, but instead of just sitting and complaining about them, we actually reframe them into opportunities for a better future.
Yes.
So that's what we're going to be talking about today. First, before we get into everything, I got to know what type of shit you've been on lately.
So we are, this is our debut of a new segment we want to do. We usually do What's in Your Cup, and we're kind of making a little switch here. And we're calling it Shit I've Been On Lately.
Well, it's like we do more than just take supplements all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and drink
And
supplements.
drink things.
And so if there's any new lifestyle modality, even a thought that you've had, I want to open the space.
Account that you've been loving, or song, or podcast, anything that we've been immersing ourselves in that has had great positive impact in our life, I think. So the shit I've been on lately that I wanted to mention is actually the workouts that I've been doing lately. So for the last probably 3 months or so, I have been working out with an app called Fit with Coco. And this is a girl, her name is Courtney Fisher, and she's been a trainer, been an athlete, and similar story to mine, where she kind of went overboard and had to pull the reins back and, you know, really adjust her approach, adjust her relationship to her lifestyle, her relationship to food and exercise. And I had been doing, you know, sort of like bodybuilding type splits for like 4 or 5 years, for a very long time. And I liked them. I like lifting heavy. But as we sort of navigate into this new season of, you know, trying to conceive and fertility maximization, not that lifting heavy is bad for fertility. I'm not saying that whatsoever. My body was asking for a change. So instead of, you know, benching and deadlifting and maxing out on squats and things like that, I was like, you know, I'm going to switch this up. And I really was drawn to this platform, Fit with Coco, and it's a mixture of strength and Pilates. So it's like, it's basically like a Netflix of working out inside this app. This girl is great. She knows her stuff. And she's really aligned with a lot of the things that we talk about, you know, getting your protein in, walking, you know, your steps every day, not going overboard, having a deload week or 2. So I really align with a lot of the things that she says and teaches, aside from just like the exercises. But I really am loving the infusion of Pilates into my strength workouts, because it's all about like lengthening and lighter impact. So less impact, less, you know, super high intensity cardio, lighter weights. But I leave every one of these workouts like full on, full body sweat. They are hard, but low impact. And they really are, I'm just loving the novelty of it. And I look forward to every single workout. So if you are in the market for, you know, either starting to lift, this would be a great place for someone to start. If you know nothing about lifting, I mean, she starts with like 5-pound weights. Yeah. You can get a lot done with 5-pound weights. It's really minimal exercise. It's meant to be done from home. So you can do it in the gym too, but you only need a very minimal workout gear, workout equipment, few sets of weights, ankle weights, couple bands, and you're pretty much good to go. So I will put that link in the show notes if you guys want to try out. She has a monthly membership that's absolutely worth it.
And we have no affiliation with her.
We don't have an affiliation, but I have like a referral link.
Oh,
so
nice. Okay.
if you signed up and you use this link, I get like a discount on a membership, but whatever. I'm not really sharing it for that reason. But I will put that link in the show notes if you guys want to check it out. She has an annual membership or a monthly membership. And she also has like a free week of workouts if you just want to try it out and see how you like it, see if you would enjoy this type of workout. I can't say enough good things about it, but that is the shit I've been on lately.
Yeah, I love it. Your body has responded just beautifully. You look incredible. You look very healthy. And it's a reminder that it took me way too long to understand this about exercise, but so much of the response that your body takes to the type of programming that you're doing is so much to do with the signal that you're giving your brain. And so the exercise itself, while it of course has some very practical, spot treatment on body parts and things of that nature, but more importantly is like the communication signal that you're giving your brain as you are exercising You talked about lengthening. That with the Pilates style exercise combined with some strength attributes in that exercise is a signal to your brain to lengthen and strengthen. Someone who's like an explosive athlete or who is looking for power or something more explosive, if that's the goal, you would train through power and explosiveness, for instance. If you're someone who's looking for more bodybuilding, like a hypertrophy style training, you're looking for more fatigue, maybe a little bit higher rep ranges than you would with like powerlifting, and then like really strong recovery so that you're signaling to your brain, I'm going to tear and repair so that you can come back more, abundant. And so I love the Pilates signal that it gives the brain, especially for like the female body. I think that's a really, really supportive communication.
Yeah. Don't make the mistake of thinking that Pilates is some like, airy fairy thing.
No.
Like you see me in my workouts, like it is intense.
It's intense.
It's intense, but still low impact, which I
would
love.
have no hip flexors left. It would be nothing.
Or they would just be really strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. What have you been on? What shit have you been on lately?
Really
babe?
simple shit. I have been cutting back on caffeine a lot. Struggling with insomnia, which is it's not new news to anybody listening to the medicine. I've talked about that for years, and have had a little bout of sleeplessness here of late. And what's one thing that I know is low hanging fruit, low barrier to entry for supporting more rest, less stress, and that's just cutting back on caffeine.
Yeah.
And so I've been down to like 1 cup of coffee a day, really small cup, and I wait an hour and a half to 2 hours in the morning before I have it. And although I felt like a junkie detoxing for a little while, I'm reminded about how amazing caffeine is, because when you maintain a level of sensitivity to it, you appreciate the little support that it can give you.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it's just like moderate caffeine use and my appreciation for the plant ally that coffee really is. And
wasn't it Michael Pollan that in his book he talked about, I think it was like his book is How to Change Your Mind, and he talks about a whole bunch of different consciousness altering, mind altering substances, caffeine being one of them. And he said that he went completely off caffeine for I think like 3 or 4 months or something, maybe even longer. But then once he had 1 cup of coffee, he said it felt like a mind altering substance, like a psychedelic.
Yeah, there's some interesting, he talks about sort of the industrial revolution, I believe it is, and the integration of coffee into like everyday consumption, and how many more ideas and how much more productivity took place just because humans were more caffeinated. It's wild.
Yeah.
I think it's Michael Pollan's book, like Your Mind on Plants. I think it's his sequel book to the it's something like that, but it is Michael Pollan.
He talked about it in How to Change Your Mind too.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the shit I've been on lately. I can't not drink something. And so while I'm waiting 2 hours to have my coffee, you know what I'm taking. Mushy Love, baby.
Ooh.
I mix Mushy Love with Organifi chocolate protein, and for like a really, really incredible caffeine-free, protein-packed, gut supporting, skin supporting, hydration supporting, mushroom protein, mocha.
Yeah, we've been putting a little bit of a dandy blend in there as well, which is a combination of dandelion and chicory root and things like that, which actually has like a coffee taste.
It does, yeah. The dandy blend is really, really good in there as well, caffeine free. So if you're interested in Organifi, you can go to Organifi.com, use the code MimiFit. You'll always get at least 20% off. I believe that's the discount. Mushy Love, get mushylove.com. You can always use the code Medicin, MEDICIN, for a discount. That is my favorite combo, is Mushy Love mixed with chocolate protein.
It's so good.
In either cold milk or even just
hot water.
It's really delicious. So check it out. All right, guys, we're going to get into our conversation today, how millennials are shaping tomorrow. Let's navigate some of the unique challenges and reframe them such that we can seize opportunities for a better future. Again, we talked about millennials generally referring to the people who were born in the early 80s up through the mid to late 90s. These are generally the folks right now who are in their late 20s, definitely their 30s, maybe some early 40s.
Yep.
Millennials are the generation of digital natives. We grew up in an era of rapid technological advancement and are highly adept at using digital technologies such as smartphones, social media, and the internet. We grew up introduced to Pong. All the way to, I don't even know what it looks like now. Fully immersive, three-dimensional, augmented reality experiences.
Yeah. Crazy. Millennials are also very value driven. We prioritize values such as authenticity, big one for me. I can attest to that. Social responsibility, absolutely. And work-life balance in our personal and professional lives. We are more likely to seek purpose and meaning in their careers. So contrasted to previous generations where you have the same job at the factory for 40 years and it pays well, you have good benefits, and you stick with it because it puts food on the table, you have good benefits, and you like the people you work with. You're not looking to job change, every 2, 3, 4 years. Our generation is more likely to look for purpose and meaning and value in the work that we do day to day. I think one reason being because there's so many opportunities out there, which we're going to talk about later. But really, we've seen this shift where millennials, and this comes into the stereotypes that we're going to talk about, where you might see millennials changing jobs every 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and that's normal.
And I realize that the world still has a lot of room for improvement when it comes to diversity and inclusion. But we are the generation that has been the most diverse and the most inclusive. So again, whether that's a pro or a con, we're not going to necessarily get into that, but we are the kids of 60s and 70s hippies or counterculture. And with the integration of technology, we were just able to see more diversity in the world, more a wide variety of opinions on how to live. And as such, I think we've taken part in living maybe more diverse, maybe more inclusive lives than our parents' generation did for that very reason. And so what that has meant is that I think the millennials, although there's still much room to be improved, tend to see race a lot more different, see it differently. I think sexual orientation, I think various identities, various cultures, where there's a lot more of an acceptance. And I realize this is still a very charged freaking topic.
Yeah, it is.
But let's just be practical.
Yeah.
Our generation is an improvement from the prior generation, even if there's still a lot of work to be had.
Right. Yeah. I would say too, millennials more so than any generation before have tended to delay major life events, things like getting married, sometimes even going to college, where you might take a gap year or something before you get into the work world or whatever, but delaying major life milestones, marriage, home ownership, starting a family. And this could be due to a host of things, one of them being like economic challenges where we might have a good job, but we, for whatever reason, still can't save enough in relation to how much inflation there is. And we're going to get into that a little bit. But we also have high student loan debt, stagnant wages, and like I said, housing affordability issues.
Yeah.
So where our previous, parents and generation, like, it was weird if you weren't married by 25. It was like, what's wrong with you?
Right.
So that's changing a lot for our generation.
Yeah, we're not sociologists or historians or psychologists, but it's hard not to see birth control being a big contributor there to delayed family making.
Not that we're big proponents of birth control.
Right. I think the traditional family, the traditional marriage was sort of shattered 25 to 30 years ago or more. And that's led to just more flexibility and freedom with what you can do with your life. It's less narrow of a path for you to go down. And so if it's as simple as just indecisiveness because there's so many options, people aren't quote unquote settling down until a little bit later, like us. We don't have kids.
Right. Yeah.
Millennials are pretty entrepreneurial, like pretty flexible, can autonomously work on their own careers, and have ushered in the gig economy, the influencer economy, the content creator economy, the Uber, the VRBO, the Airbnb, the Netflix. This is the entrepreneurial spirit that is behind a lot of the current conveniences that we love today. It's this sort of millennial drive for entrepreneurship and autonomy outside of the major corporations and governments that have got us to this point.
I would say the majority of like tech bros,
yes,
that are paving the way for these conveniences, all on our phone, are millennial tech bros.
There are plenty of boomers and older that are still in major positions of economic and industrial significance. But tech is one that our generation has essentially taken the reins from earlier by sheer force due to the fact that we grew up with technological acumen. And so you've seen a change in the power dynamic with the tech space from younger people. Zuckerberg's a millennial, some of these other folks that are sitting in these positions, the Sam Altman and the AI movement is very much led by, people who are roughly our age. That is different than like the financial sector. Where, or politics, where we've got really older generations. And it's likely a reason for some of the challenges that we have is just generational power dynamics aren't quite in alignment or synchronicity yet.
Financial sector minus Bitcoin.
Sure. Right. Bitcoin has been a disruptor for sure. And that's a power struggle, right? Is like we've got kind of old currency ideas basically playing tug of war with cryptocurrency. Really interesting stuff. Okay, what would be some major events that have impacted millennials that people can probably resonate with? Well, 9/11 and September 11th terrorist attacks occurred during very formative years for millennials. And even if you're someone who's like 27 years old and you were only 3 when 9/11 happened, it still impacted you consciously or not.
I remember exactly where I was. I remembered it was, I'm pretty sure it was a Tuesday. So random. I was at my mom's house. She came into my room at like 7 a.m. and was like, somebody blew up the World Trade Center. And I was like, what is that? What's the World Trade Center? And then I remember going into school and hearing about it, people wheeling in TVs, teachers talking about it all day. Like it is like burned into my brain.
And I remember being attached to a 24-hour news cycle surrounding the terrorist attacks and then what followed, which was the war in the Middle East. And what was a decades-long war after a war in the 90s that we were born into with the Gulf War. And so something that's very relevant just to millennials at large is like constant war in the Middle East. And I'm not any expert, so we're not going to be talking about, Middle East wars today, as a FYI. 2008 financial crisis, another impacting event for millennials. And this one was for us when we were in high school, moving into college. And what a weird and kind of sort of scary time to be trying to identify how you were going to go out and live in the world when people that we knew everywhere that we looked, financial struggles were very, very prevalent for families and individuals. And so that's one that definitely stands out to me. We've got technological revolution. I mean, we already talked about it a little bit, but the rise and invention of the internet, social media, and smartphones have absolutely transformed the way that humanity, the way that the planet exists. We'll get into that today. Climate change. It's whether you believe in it or not, there are significant weather events that are impacting the world that we live in that we seem to talk about nonstop. And so whether you're on one side of it or the other, it's a thing that's here.
Right.
And our generation and our world currently talks a lot about hurricanes, floods, storms, fires, solar flares, et cetera, et cetera. And it's impacting the way that we think, the way that we live, and how we orient ourselves in our life. And I can't say that it was as important to generations prior when it comes to how do we show up in the world and make decisions and face challenges.
Yep. Well, let's talk about some stereotypes. We love a good stereotype.
We do.
And in this case, we're talking about ourselves. So, when we talk about millennial stereotypes, I think we millennials are often labeled as possibly entitled, impatient, expecting instant gratification and rapid career advancement. I already talked about that. However, this stereotype possibly overlooks the economic challenges and uncertainties that they face. So yeah, I think millennials, there's like two sides to each one of these stereotypes, right? There's a bit of truth, and then there's people that kind of take it too far and apply it to everyone and don't look at the underlying foundation of what might be impacting or influencing that thing. But certainly entitlement, impatience, and instant gratification is a thing of our generation for sure. And we are not immune to that for sure. We might be labeled as lazy. There is a perception that millennials are maybe a little bit lazy or unwilling to work hard, really stick with the job. You can't skip the suck type of feeling, which there definitely is some truth to that. But in reality, millennials at large are very driven individuals. We just talked about Mark Zuckerberg and these tech bros. Like, they are paving the way for a new world of interacting with social media and technology. You cannot be a lazy person and do that. Right. So, and even, speaking to us, like, yes, I fall prey to like wanting something like that when I push a button on my phone, but also we're entrepreneurs and we're willing to work really hard for our dreams. So I think that points to maybe the different values and priorities that millennials sort of hold dear versus previous generations, where, if our parents are looking at us, maybe like talking to each other without us in the room, they might totally point to some of these things like, yeah, they're entitled, impatient, lazy, but they might not be considering the things that are impacting that from a societal and cultural standpoint. Millennials are sometimes criticized for being overly reliant on tech and social media. That is absolutely true in my own life. I have never used a map in the car, which also seems kind of dangerous while you're driving. But, I was coming of age and getting my driver's license when we were printing out MapQuest. We printed out MapQuest or wrote it down on a piece of paper, and we're following that to get to where we needed to go. Well, I never developed the skill of being directionally oriented. I am so directionally disabled. It's sort of hilarious.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I say to this similarly, yes, but you should see Gen Zs. They're way worse. I grew up doing class projects with the encyclopedias that my parents had in their house. They had books of every letter of the alphabet and every freaking word that you can possibly think of in these, with full-blown diagrams. I know I'm the generation that had to still go to the library to research,
check out books.
A project. In college, I was still using the library. I was not bringing my laptop into most classes. I'm taking notes with my hand, which was a problem because I can't pay attention. I can't multitask very well.
Can you imagine having ChatGPT now? For high schoolers?
I'd be such an idiot. And so, one of the things about these stereotypes is like, they are the byproduct of the stereotypes of the previous generations. So boomers, which are mostly millennials' parents, and then Gen X, but mostly boomers, their overconsumption, right? Their unwillingness to give up power, their lack of creating family structures and rites of passage and mentorship. These are sort of stereotypes of the boomers that resulted in laziness. Well, we're lazy because we've never even been given authority to have autonomy over our lives, because boomers cling to every little sliver of power that they can maintain. Again, this is stereotypes. Yeah. This isn't every boomer. This isn't necessarily my parents, but this is the stereotype.
Yeah.
And so what happens to a generation that feels somewhat powerless? Well, you get some that create their own avenues of creativity and have to step into a space that's never been discovered before, which would be this sort of technological boom that came from many of the millennials. But some of the others who didn't pave their own way are stuck in the systems that are still run by previous generations and are deflated by the inability to even have mentorship, a rite of passage. God forbid someone actually step in and mentor a millennial. Like, one of the biggest complaints that I've had through my life is like, don't have a mentor, don't have someone supporting me or wanting to show me how to do it.
Yeah.
And I thought that maybe was unique to me and something was wrong to me, but I've interacted with a lot of other millennials who've similarly said, man, I feel like that's something you only see in like a book or you read about from like, you talk about like Carl Jung was the mentee of Freud, and you know, Aristotle was learned from Plato, and Plato learned from Socrates. Like, I don't know if that really happened in our life. And so a lot of these stereotypes of millennials are the byproduct of the boomer stereotypes, which again, like you're saying, there's some truth here, and there's some exaggeration and some generalizations.
Sure, that is a like the definition of a stereotype. It's like there's a seed of truth, but there's also other factors that you have to like look at.
Totally.
So tying this up here, the last stereotype that I was going to mention is millennials are often portrayed as financially irresponsible. You know, we are more likely to spend money on experiences rather than saving for the future. And certainly that's not everyone, but I have known very close friends in my life who are more than willing to go into the red in their checking account to go on a vacation that they think is going to be really fun. And they'll figure out the rest later. They'll figure out their job. They'll figure out the money thing later.
Right.
And, some of that is like, you know, YOLO. You don't know when you're going to die. Might as well enjoy your life. But also, I think that can go too far where, you know, you're being sort of financially irresponsible. However, it's not just spending money on vacations and shopping sprees and, you know, journeys that millennials are, you know, engaging in. There's also other economic factors, which we're going to talk about later, you know, high student loan debt and low wages contributing to financial challenges in general. So it's not just our spending.
Totally. And to put it as simple as that, sure, yes, not great with money, not great with spending, but we have more opportunities to spend. We have more people trying to hijack our buying psychology. Right. We've got dopamine-driven information coming constantly as it pertains to what we don't have.
Right.
And so if we don't have a really strong constitution as it pertains to our life and how and our relationship with money, we're going to be tempted at a 360 degree turning radius. Everywhere we go, we're tempted to buy money. Right. We're told that we should be buying money, and it's a challenge.
Or spending money.
Spending money,
I mean, you have to be like a freaking like self-control ninja to not like get caught up by even just like Instagram ads.
Right. So what's the point? I'm even feeling myself wanting to complain already about the cards that we've been dealt.
We got out of our system.
This generation, our millennial generation, we're in our 30s, maybe 40s, maybe even late 20s, and we're stepping into like, oh shit, we have to be adults now.
Yeah.
We're starting families. We're parents. We're leaders in our community. Mm-hmm. We are going to be impacting the way that the world works for, I hope, a little while.
Yeah.
And I am not interested in only complaining about the cards that we've been dealt, because there are cards whether we like it or not. So the rest of this conversation is around identifying 5 challenges that we can transmute, that we can reframe into opportunities. This is not an all-inclusive list, everybody. There's many, many challenges. We're obviously not talking about some serious things coming down the pipeline. We've got foreign wars. We've got the artificial intelligence sort of like wave that's going to hit at some point. It's hitting sort of in small spaces, but it's going to take over the freaking world likely. We've got health crises. We've got a host of things going on. So
while we can, you know, some of this might be out of our control, but to the degree that we can, this is us as millennials or whoever, wherever you're at in the generation lineup. This is us stepping out of victim mentality into being our best advocate, into I am a sovereign, wise adult. I'm going to do the best with what I have in front of me.
Yep.
And so this is us laying out specific challenges and how we're going to step out of victim mentality into I'm a sovereign, wise adult.
Right. It's like just because our school and our parents never taught us about credit and we kind of fucked up our credit score because of it, that doesn't mean we have to sit in that space forever.
No.
And so it's time to teach ourselves about how to be financially responsible.
Yeah.
And that is an opportunity. Yes, the challenge is that we were never taught these things, and the world is a place where you can really get yourself into bad credit if you don't actually have awareness around what impacts credit. But as we step into that challenge, we have to reframe it into an opportunity. Otherwise, we'll never make any movement. And so that's what the rest of this conversation is about. Starting with the elephant in the room, tech and social media. The challenge, technology and social media has become an appendage to our bodies, to our identities, to our personalities, every aspect of our life professionally, and for most of us personally. Who am I without my social media profile? It is a component to who I am.
This is me.
Your personal brand.
Yeah. This is me encouraging followers to go on a walk without your phone. Holy crap. This is the most simple shit ever. And, but it's also profound in this day and age to go on a walk without your phone, without being stimulated. Just listen to nature or talk to whoever you're with. If you think about it, 40 years ago, everyone went on walks without their phone. They left their phone on the wall in their house. Right. That's hard for us to even, people, Gen Zers don't even know where the word dial comes from. The dialing, the pushing of the buttons, the turning of the little freaking circle thing that, holy crap.
Yeah. I mean, we're 10 years away from people not remembering what pencils are. So... Unfortunately, or fortunately, technology and social media have been highly productive and have opened up many, 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 many opportunities. So while I believe this is a net positive, technology and social media is a net positive, I think.
Yeah.
It is clearly not good for us in many, many ways.
Yes.
Especially for our mental and emotional health. Always being available for work, constantly on, always having emails, bosses texting you, WhatsApping you, Slacking you, emailing you, FaceTiming you,
DMing.
It's shut the fuck up. Let me just take a breath. Immediate gratification. Our patience has been hijacked because we can get information whenever we want, wherever we want. We can get Amazon delivered today.
Or a meal or a ride or whatever.
The smartest people and, likely artificial intelligence robots now and in the future are going to be studying and perfecting how to keep our attention. That is concerning as we consume our technological devices and entertainment, because there is a craft behind it to keep us paying attention. So that is concerning. The risks of unearned pleasure, something like pornography, even something like, I think, consuming a ton of media in the form of movies and entertainment really sort of desensitizes your ability to experience pleasure. And, Andrew Huberman talks often about the dangers of unearned pleasure.
I think also on that note, unearned pleasure and unearned wisdom. So because we can look up, on Google or ChatGPT, anything since, basically for you and I, college on, any fact, anything that we wanted to know, we could look up instantly.
Yep.
So we feel smarter or more intelligent than our wisdom, our experience, our life experience would indicate. Right. So there's this mismatch of random information that we're able to look up, not being backed by life experience and wisdom. Right.
Totally. Great point. We don't get outside near as much because of all the reasons I just mentioned. We're maybe borderline addicted to the technology. We have an obligation to the technology because that's where our livelihood exists, and we're entertained by it. So it's like an effort to have a relationship with nature. And then the last thing I'll say is, as it pertains to the challenge, before I kind of spin this into an opportunity, is that we have never been more, quote unquote, connected. We talk to friends, we talk to family all the time. We're meeting people that we never would have met in person. However, are we really connecting? I feel like this really started with the millennials in the 90s, late 90s, maybe the early 2000s. I grew up with AOL Instant Messenger, MySpace, and then Facebook and Instagram, and now TikTok sort of took over the world. But are we really connecting? There's actually scientific studies now that show our chemical experiences of connection are radically different when they're in person versus over something like a device. There's also the just flat out deterioration of the human psyche through social media. It takes no genius to realize that the hostility and the divisiveness on social media platforms is so much more significant than when people get together face to face and spend quality time with each other.
Yeah.
And so that's me mapping the territory of the challenges with tech and social media.
I'm going to add one more thing.
Sure.
This is really important. It's very prevalent in basically anyone that I talk to who's any type of creator online, but really anyone is like, because we have access to anyone and everyone, their social media, their, accounts, DMing them, whatever, their life, what they choose to put out there. And even from listening to podcasts and audiobooks, there's information everywhere that you can access at all times whenever you want at the click of a button, most of it for free. This is so additive to the I'm not doing enough attitude.
Yeah, right.
Because you see what everyone else is doing and it might be different than what you're doing in your life. It likely is different because they're on a different path. And I fall prey to this a lot in my life where I see what other people are doing, what other entrepreneurs are doing, what other podcasters are doing. And even though what we're doing is working for us and it feels good and it fits and it's serving a bunch of people, I still get this little voice in my head that's like, girl, you're not doing enough.
Right.
All the freaking time. And if I didn't have access to what everyone else was doing, I might not learn as much, but this is where I think it might be a net negative for me personally in certain aspects of my life, where you're more focused on what other people are doing and you use that as criticism fuel for yourself, which is, in my opinion, a net negative.
It is a negative in aspects of your life. I do think the positives holistically outweigh those negatives. For instance, we have a world and a life that we get to live very autonomously with the cons, and those are the cons, right? Yeah. And that's where we get to this opportunity. And we are the last generation that knows what life is like without technology and social media.
Yeah.
And that is actually very empowering to sit in, because it is up to us to educate and keep sacred that reality outside of the tech, the non-digital reality, the one that is flesh and bone. That is so important and it's sacred. And we get to curate a world that includes the best of both. I realize that's very aspirational, but it is possible with an emphasis on protecting in-person connection, in nature connection. What does that mean? I think the opportunity for us is, where can we find unbound play without technology, without devices? I think sports is one of the sort of like saving graces of non-technological activities that humans can participate in, because you don't have to use a device and you get to experience this feeling of losing the concept of time, losing the concept of productivity, and you're just playing. Where can you, without being an athlete, find unbound play, even if it seems quote unquote unproductive? The value of nature. We can use the tech to quantify how important being in nature is. We're seeing it all the time. There's scientific evidence of the benefits of grounding, of earthing, of using your eyes for distance looking, for looking at mountaintops, for watching the sunrise. Our physicality responds so beautifully to nature when we unplug from the tech, and the tech can actually quantify why that's good for us. Let's use both of these realities in a way that says, guys, we have to start self-regulating our own relationship to technology and experience nature in the way that it's going to provide vitality and abundance to our lives. What about hobbies? What about crafts? How do we exist without, I get it, Instagram, hobby, YouTuber, excellent, awesome. But those sort of trickle into occupation, and it still keeps you connected to the tech.
Yeah.
What about painting? We've developed this relationship with painting, with crafts over the last 3 or 4 years that is so therapeutic and fun. And it's doing all of these life additive, life abundant things to the way that we exist. Building things with our own hands. Again, finding sport, finding exercise. These are all outside of the tech space. And then work-life balance. How do we set up the work environment to include, yes, some critical technology interface and integration, but can we start to dictate no phone zones? There's a lot of times where I'm very, very productive by shutting down all of the applications that may be distracting and hyper-focusing on the task at hand. No social media hours for your personal life. We've been talking about setting almost like guidelines on where and when we use social media so that, by 7:00 every night, we just no more Instagram. And maybe we can text some family or take a FaceTime with a family member or friend, but it is over for
No social media.
Yeah. What about family phone calls instead of text threads? Text threads are great. They're totally awesome.
Yeah.
You can stay updated, but it's like pseudo connection because it's pretty surface level. It's more like getting a bullet pointed newsletter from your family members instead of actually seeing them.
Yeah. Or you're just receiving a picture or you respond with a GIF and you're like, I talk to my mom almost every single day. But, I just had this the other day where I was like, I talk to my sisters and my mom. We have a text thread and it's every single day I'm getting, which is great. I love it. It's usually like pictures and videos of my nieces and nephews or like projects that my mom's doing or whatever, which I love. But then I was like, wait, when was the last time I actually called my sister or called my mom?
Right.
If it's been a couple of weeks, it's like, you're dipping into that territory where you think you're more connected than you actually are.
Totally. So it's like more in-person connections, more coffee connections. If you live in the same town as your family or friends, excellent. See them. But we don't live in the same town as many of our friends and all of our family. Twice a year, we're seeing family members, that's siblings and parents at least. And we have a couple friends that we travel to see every single year and without fail. And it's been such a nutrient to our lives and the way that we feel loved as well as get to communicate our love.
Yeah.
So I cannot encourage those. I cannot encourage people to attempt those more and more. Better than a text is a phone call. Better than a phone call is a Zoom call. Be creative in the way that you can experience more connection beyond a like on Instagram.
And this is not just for you and me and the listener who's listening right now. This is actually things that we get to teach our kids.
Totally. Yep.
Because we have to pass on and teach
through action
and embodiment, the love of nature and the self-control around putting your phone down. And all of those things are going to be amplified when we have a little face staring at us and we're like, oh shit, I've been on my phone for 20 minutes, not paying attention to my kid or whatever. And so it's like we, as the millennials, have to have one of our feet on, the solid ground of our childhood, growing up, riding bikes, playing outside, getting dirty and just being immersed in nature. And then now, one foot on a little more shaky, unknown, say it's like water, right? Where we now get to be the bridge for our children and their generation of here's how you play in both worlds. So it's not just our responsibility. It's also our responsibility to pass it on through embodiment to our children.
Well said. It has to be embodiment. Talk is cheap. Think about the things your parents told you but didn't embody.
I know.
It didn't land.
No.
In fact, it sort of makes you do the opposite. When your parent says, you need to do this, and you look at them and you go, you haven't done that in your life.
Yeah.
Well, fuck you.
Yeah.
Different from the things that I learned the most from my parents was all what they embodied and they showed up as in their actions.
Yeah.
And so if we don't actually make the change in our own lives, it will not be reflected into our kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that was the first one. And that was honestly the beefiest one. The rest of these we'll be able to rapid fire a bit more. But that was tech and social media challenges turned into opportunities.
Yeah.
You're going to give us a little breakdown of the health and wellness challenge and op.
Yeah. So health and wellness, it's something that we talk about basically every episode of the podcast to some degree. It's a hobby. It's a passion of ours. And And I think when we look generationally, differences from our generation to previous generations, I think the majority of millennials today don't trust the conventional medical system anymore. And this was happening even before the COVID crisis, took place, especially in the communities that we've been involved in, of course. But certainly COVID amplified this. People are
Definitely.
on more high alert of what are the government agencies, what are these health elite, quote unquotes, telling us, but not embodying clearly, obese health officials telling us what we should and should not do in order to be healthy. It just doesn't land. We're able to use logic and be like, WTF, what are you saying to us? So, we just don't trust the conventional medical system in general. Or at least we see the evidence that we should be questioning just about everything that comes from conventional medicine aside from emergency medicine. If I break a bone, if I have a serious accident, if I get in a car wreck, I want that ambulance.
Right.
I want that hospital. I want, even in, talking about birth, although I think C-sections are used probably more than they should be, I am grateful for that procedure because 10 to 15% of mothers, would have died if that procedure didn't exist. So it's not about just shaming conventional medicine. We know that it has its place for sure, but different from our parents' generation, especially like boomers and maybe getting into Gen X a little bit. They, went to their doctor, their yearly physical every year. I can't tell you the last time I had an annual physical, but it was like a very normal thing for our parents' generation.
Yeah.
Turn your head and cough type thing, which I've obviously never had done.
And candidly, it was easier. It was easier to be seen by a doctor.
Yeah.
Now you've got like 30 different hoops and barriers to entry. You've called Kaiser 7 times to get a hold of a local doctor who's 30 miles away.
Oh my gosh.
To see you for 7 minutes.
When we had Kaiser, I just wanted an eye appointment and it was a 4-month wait for just a simple eye exam. I was like, I need contacts like now. So, we had to go out and pay out of pocket. So, and that's really consistent with what other people have experienced in the millennial generation. Like pretty much every person I know that's around our age has had some kind of mystery cluster of symptoms pop up, or autoimmune condition or chronic illness that really has impacted their life. And they've either been sort of brushed off by the conventional medical system. Maybe they went to their family practitioner doctor and they were like, oh, you seem fine, and kind of ignoring them. Or they just have been let down in some way where the only option, the only solution was like pharmaceuticals that maybe, or an antibiotic or whatever that maybe lasted for a week or two, but then dropped off. And now they're like, WTF, what do I do? This is usually where it's a blessing and a curse, right? Like you want to be able to trust your doctor, but we also need to learn the painful lesson of being our own best advocate. And this is, getting into opportunity territory, but just to finish up the challenge, this is usually where people realize, okay, I'm going to have to figure this out on my own, or go to great lengths to find the practitioner that will work with me and not just brush me off or not believe me.
Yep.
Right. And then, so in this same challenge, we swing to the other end of the spectrum where now alternative medicine, quote unquote, alternative types of medicine is a wide ranging scope of health advice and uncredentialed healthcare practitioners, health coaches. Anyone can call themselves a coach and start taking clients. You have no idea what sort of training or education or certification that person has been through.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like the wild, wild west out there. So, this is where we come to the opportunity where we get to find the happy medium.
Right. It's like Liver King, for anybody who's aware of Liver King. He's this massively roided out Instagram influencer that has millions and millions of followers. sells supplements, gives health advice. He's eating, he's taking bites of raw, like organs with blood dripping all over his
testicles,
like bulged HGH body. And like, I kind of like the guy because he's funny and he's got clearly,
he's entertainment.
He's a marketer, right?
You're not going to take health advice from him though.
You should not take health advice from him. You should not. And he lied saying that he was natural. Like, so fucking red flag. But this is what we're balancing. We're balancing the doctor who says all of that bullshit, alternative medicine stuff is pseudoscience. We need to blast you with pharmaceuticals. And then you go out to figure it out on your own. And you can't stop, no matter how hard you try to scroll past Liver King, you can't not look at him or listen to him.
So we come to the opportunity, which is finding somewhere in the middle, not too much, not too little. That is the mantra for life in every aspect. This is where we get to ask ourselves, where can we take back, step into responsibility, ownership of our experience, and become our own best health advocate, and be wise and discerning about who we choose to send our dollars to in the way of health and healthcare. So, the one of the people that comes to mind is actually the episode that came out today with Kaylee McDevitt. She is a registered dietitian. She went to school. She did all of the schooling, got the degree, did all of the foundational work, and then got into real life and realized that, hey, a lot of this information is outdated and it's contrary to what I'm seeing in real life, what women really need. And she was able to educate herself and immerse herself into newer research and testing out on herself and new nutrition concepts. And, now has this thriving practice where she has the best of both worlds, where she is grateful and has the backing, the education, the letters behind her name, but she's also embraced like, hey, I got to listen to people. I got to listen to their symptoms. I got to constantly want to learn and grow. Nathan Riley is another example of that. People who, and I'm an example just in the dental world, where you're brought up in the system, you excel in the traditional system, and then you branch out and you expand your horizons to be more holistic, but you still have that foundational education.
I look at it, the way that we have to approach health is the way that we also have to approach our finances and our money. And we're more adept at money, even though we're still dysfunctional, because you've been thrown to the wolves when you become an adult, in most cases, unless you come from a wealthy family or come from privilege. You're thrown to the wolves financially. And if you don't take ownership of your own financial profile, your own financial portfolio, where your money is going, how it's coming in, how it's going out, you will be crushed. And you can't outsource your financial health and well-being to somebody else. You'll be fucked. In the same way, we're getting to this point where you just can't outsource your health to somebody else. So it's time to take the power back, if you will. And so in the same way that you sort of have to manage your credit cards, your savings account, your investments accounts, your mortgage, your et cetera, financial, that's all on you. You might have a consultant, you might have a financial advisor if you're lucky enough to have those types of attributes. But we got to start doing this with our health too. Where are my labs? I need my own blood work. I need to keep track of my own, minerals. I need to make sure that I'm exercising. I need to monitor the macros and the micros as it pertains to my nutrition lifestyle. And I need to sort of build this profile for myself that I manage, that I run. Yes, I've got supporters in these practitioners, maybe even a doctor. I've got a resource like insurance if I break my leg and I need an ambulance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've got to take that power back. And unfortunately, it's just going to be a few bumps and bruises along the way as we figure this out. I like to think that the Medicin Podcast is a supportive ally in that journey for you. Why are we talking about getting your minerals registered and read and maintained so that you have awareness around them? It's for this very purpose. We are trying to build our own ability to navigate our health and well-being, as well as equip you with some suggestions that we've found valuable along the way. And so this is one where I definitely see us a call to step into empowering ourselves, empowering others. It's time to become our own best health advocates.
Yeah, and you said it. It's like getting the big boulders of sleep, nutrition, movement, daylight, relationships, like even just those 5, getting those big boulders in place. And no one else can do that for you.
Right.
No one is going to be doing your grocery shopping for you. No one is going to be working on your relationship. No one is going to be telling you when exactly you need to go to sleep. This is on you. Those are the big boulders. And then for the fine tuning, for the small rocks that do have a lot of weight, like minerals, you can't really do that on your own. You need someone like Kaylee McDevitt to help you run a lab and see where you're at, and then give you the fine tuning, like, okay, based on your symptoms, based on what I'm seeing in the labs, let's work on this. Here's some tweaks that you can do.
Yep.
That, in our experience, has been the most successful for optimizing health. Yeah. So yeah, I think we're doing, if I can toot our horns a little bit, we really do try to do our best at being a living example, a living embodiment of that, not too much, not too little in the health space.
These opportunities we're talking about today for millennials.
Yeah.
One might resonate more than another.
Yeah.
And it's not that you should be some sort of like authority or expert in each one of these, let's hope that we can collectively as a community support each other and with different strengths or different areas where you might need support, et cetera, et cetera. And so, that is one that calls to us.
Yeah.
And others will call more significantly to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, good transition on the topic of, financial responsibility and autonomy. Let's talk about the economy. Let's talk about economics for our generation and what has that challenge looked like? Well, the general cost of living is out of control.
To put it lightly.
There's clearly only a select few who are capturing the wealth. Like we're talking about like the big, abundant FU money level wealth. Like the data is not hard to find. Go out and look for who runs the show in the world that we live in.
Look out for who is currently building $1 billion bunker.
Right. The middle class used to participate in about 60% of the wealth. And currently, I think it is less than what the 1%, the 1% now have that 60%, or at least more than 50%. And that is nuts. 50 years ago, couples could buy a house, have multiple kids, and live a pretty great life on one solid salary. Today, the cost of childcare alone pretty much removes the ability for one of the parents not to work. Parents really have to decide whether both of them can work or whether one of them has to just full-blown run a daycare at home while the other one works due to the cost of childcare.
Yeah.
We are some of the first generation that while we have the ability to dream about other realities because it's available to us, we look at the way that people live their lives on social medias, there's different educational realms that you can, decide to be in that you may not have had earlier. Let's say that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, there's a good chance that you're doing something very similar to what your parents were doing as an occupation, just because the sheer opportunities that were there, or the sheer awareness of what else was there was not available to you. That is different now. There are more opportunities. However, the barrier to entry because of the economy and the challenge with cost of living can keep people from even participating in those dreams. God forbid you want to own your own home. How dare you?
How dare you? In the city that you want.
It's so nuts. We saw a recent report where in San Diego alone, which I think is the most expensive city to live in the U.S. per 2023 statistics, the sheer household income it took to have a first starter home has doubled in pre-pandemic versus now. And so you need close to $300,000 a year of household income in San Diego to afford like a general starter home. We're talking like 2 bedrooms, 2 bathroom type of situation. And I realize it's San Diego and it's a beautiful place to live, but this is impacting everybody everywhere. So what do we do about this? I could go on at length, and we have more conversations upcoming that get into more detail about the economy. Inflation is another one. Our dollar is getting beat out by inflation in almost every situation possible. To work a salaried job without some sort of horizontal income, which I encourage most people to evaluate whether they should have something like a hobby business or a horizontal investment. so that they can cash flow properly and supplement their salary. It shouldn't have to be like a necessity, which it's gotten to, where if you just have a decent salary paying job and you're sort of a career man working as a W-2 employee, which is great, thank God for those folks who do, it can actually still be very, very hard to survive from a financial standpoint. And so that unfortunately is a huge bummer, but let's evolve this challenge into an opportunity. We can now make money in many, many different ways that don't require us to be chained to a desk or have to go through a 4-year education. One of the challenges that we had is that everybody told us, go to college, take on debt.
It's the best kind of debt
investment you can possibly make.
Yeah.
And that has proven to be not true. We have too many friends to count, and ourselves included, who have been strapped because of the student loans that we've had in our life. And it's hijacked our ability to experience financial freedom. That being said, we now, through technology again, have the ability to facilitate wealth at a new creative way than maybe previous generations could. This is the gig economy, crowdfunding startups. That wasn't even a thing like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Content creator and influencer space. These are great. Take those opportunities if they're available to you. That being said, will they last? Are these great, or are these a fix? Are these a real fix, or are they just a bandage to the broken system? Uber's more expensive than ever. Startups have been sold or merged with other massive corporate conglomerates. What seemed very affordable streaming services 10 years ago is now more expensive than cable, because you need to have 7 of them just to be able to watch your 4 favorite shows.
I remember when Netflix was like $6 a month.
Right. And this is the model. You enter the marketplace with a really low cost. So you leave your previous provider and join the very affordable one. While they lose money, they're okay with it because they're gathering users, only to gather users and then implement profiting strategies, higher cost of implementation for the consumer. And now you're back in the same position that you started with. You may have had a few years of economic favorability, but the system is still broken. Or these startups, as I've seen myself in the startup space, eventually, although they start out super crafty, super unique, really sort of like hyper localized and seemingly very fitted to the consumer, ultimately sell to
they get acquired.
The massive companies, the 5 to 7 companies that run pretty much every major industry in the world. And so my big question, even the content creator space, the influencer space, podcast, YouTubers are more and more being run by agencies and marketing firms. So maybe a more important opportunity is how we can change the economic narrative that less for you means more for me. I think thing behind the thing when it comes to economic challenges really has to do with this idea of scarcity, and that resources are scarce such that I need to accumulate as much as I possibly can in order to preserve my financial vitality for myself, my family, and my next generation. And unfortunately, what that means is that there is going to be somebody who is negatively impacted from that. And I can't help but see that that is a problem. Competition's super important, but when it comes to hoarding resources beyond what is reasonable, I think it's starting to really, really impact the way that humans exist on this planet. So how do we structure a system that incentivizes and supports generosity, not greed, actual health and vitality over profit margins and revenue growth? Every major industry, the food system, healthcare, the financial system, the tech, just to name a few, they have stripped quality at the sake of quantity. Shareholders are more important for a healthcare company than the person receiving the freaking healthcare. Fake meat benefits the shareholders because of profit margins, but wrecks the consumer, many of whom are unaware. And so the opportunity that we have as it pertains to the financial space, to the economy at large, is how do we incentivize, how do we craft an environment that is truly based in abundance instead of scarcity. And I think that although may never be a perfect solution, there are obvious steps towards a better way of being economically and financially that are available to us.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as changing some incentives to begin with.
I think also as consumers, not always going with Amazon, not always going
And that's
with,
hard, right?
It is.
It's hard.
We're people that use Amazon. I'm not going to lie. It's really nice to just push a button from the couch and have the supplement that I need or the whatever that I need the next day on my doorstep. That's really, really nice. But there is still a lot of need. There's necessity. We live on Coronado Island in San Diego, and it's full of wonderful, beautiful little shops and restaurants. And we do our best to support the restaurants and coffee shops and things all the time. But I'm reinvigorated. I'm re-inspired to, if I can buy the thing from the Walgreens or Rite Aid or the local shop, the local boutique store instead of Amazon, I'm inspired to do that. Because if people listening, if you do not buy from small business, they won't be there anymore. And we all love going into any city, any town and shopping and being just amongst small business. It really adds to the experience of vacation, of getting out and the community aspect of different cities. If those small businesses aren't there, that aspect, that feeling is gone.
No, can you imagine a world where just a cookie cutter downtown was like the same place everywhere you went, with the same chains, the same stores, the same whatever? And like in a lot of cases that's the reality, right?
Yeah.
And I realize there's some economic favorability to that model. At the same time, it sort of strips the life out of those businesses, and small business has been the backbone of like the American dream.
Yeah. So that's one small low-hanging fruit thing that we can all do.
That's one of the reasons we haven't taken on investors for our products, is because we want to keep a small business feel to them, and we don't want to jeopardize the ability for us to make heartfelt decisions for our business for the sake of investors or for stockholders or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Well, moving on to another challenge and opportunity would be what we find very relevant right now, and that is the childhood and parenting environment that millennials are stepping into as you become new parents, as you socialize the idea of becoming parents. And, as we become teachers and coaches and, leaders in our communities, we're dealing with a younger generation. Yeah.
And I feel the weight of the responsibility on my shoulders, knowing that being a parent is the most important job in the world. I feel that deeply. And this is one of the reasons why we've waited until we're, in our mid-30s now to become parents, because it's that important of a job. I'm not saying everyone needs to wait till the mid-30s. This has been the right decision for us and our story. So when we think about millennials as parents, now a lot of us are having young kids, and the challenge here is to not overcorrect in response to what may have been, our own challenging childhoods. You and I had beautiful childhoods, but we all have little T trauma, big T trauma floating around in our childhood somewhere, somehow. And we are also more aware of it than ever.
Right.
With the internet, with podcasts, with audiobooks, with access to all information at all times, we now understand the impact of certain things from childhood. So we have this unique challenge of not overcorrecting from that and swinging to the opposite end of the spectrum, which is lack of boundaries, gentle parenting. And this is not to offend anyone out there who would call themselves, practicers of gentle parenting. This is not what I'm doing here. But I think it is sort of foolish to not recognize that that exists. And it might have negative aspects that we're not aware of right now for the people who maybe don't implement healthy, strong boundaries for their kids. For, just as an example, we know people that had trauma around bedtime with themselves when they were a kid. They, not even trauma, like just like bad memories or like not wanting to go to bed.
Yeah.
And now with their kids, it's a 2.5 hour ordeal every single night because the parents don't want to make bedtime a scary or bad or hard thing for their kids. So there's zero boundaries, there's zero guidelines, there's zero rules, there's zero routine. And everyone around these kids feels the effect of that.
Yeah.
So this is just one example.
Yeah, I think this is another case with childhood and parenting where we as millennials had the unique experience of getting some legacy parenting, whether that or legacy adult experiences when we were kids. What do I mean by legacy parenting or legacy adult experiences is that I think for a long time prior to information being readily available through the internet and through television and media, that millennials took through the 90s and early 2000s, but our parents' generation didn't have as much availability to other ways of being.
Yeah.
And so these sort of like grandfathered systems of parenting, maybe that's like those hella strict parents, just to use an example, or the church community that you grew up in where the pastor was just an asshole and was super strict and misogynistic, or you've got coaches that yelled and screamed at you and threw basketballs at you. And nobody ever called them on their shit.
We had teachers that would literally spank us, you guys. Like that is actual
bare ass
abuse.
Spanking in front of other kids
that our parents signed off to. This is not happening behind closed doors. Our parents unaware. Our parents were fully aware.
And some of those we stepped into our teens and 20s and 30s and through, whether you want to call that like internet psychology or, podcast, you start to go, holy shit, I think that was kind of intense for me.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I don't know if that was healthy.
Yeah.
And then so our immediate response is to want to overcorrect.
Yeah.
Not unlike we've had conversations about eating disorders. We have a whole eating disorder podcast and we likely have more content coming out. But a lot of times you'll see someone who grew up in a household of obesity and has a disdain for overeating will swing completely in the opposite direction and find themselves in an eating disorder out of the hate and disdain for the obesity that was
like anorexia.
Exactly. And so in this case, as we talk about childhood and then our parenting techniques, we've got to be mindful if we had a pretty rough upbringing from a strictness standpoint, not to overcorrect so far that has kind of led us to this gentle parenting idea.
Yeah. And, like everything else, like it's something just to observe of our human nature that when we experience something that is on one end of the spectrum, it is human nature for a lot of us to swing the completely different, opposite end of the spectrum and think that that's the answer.
Right.
When in reality, like everything else, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. And this is where, we land, where we're engaging in sort of parenting education, at least I am. And then we kind of have a lot of conversations about it where empathy and compassion and understanding of what constitutes as trauma for your kid, like hitting your child, is on one end of the spectrum. So having awareness of that for sure, empathy. And then on the other end of the spectrum is the necessity for loving boundaries that kids need. loving boundaries. When they are young, they are engaging the world and trying to understand reality and what they can and cannot do, and the concept of natural consequences. And I think boundaries are for us something that is going to be very, very, very important, not because we want to be strict a-hole parents, but because it's actually the most loving thing that you can do is have that understanding of healthy boundaries in combination with an empathetic and compassionate nature.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll share in later episodes, like what we're doing, what we're thinking, as far as like parenting concepts. And I'm sure we'll bring a guest on at some point. I've read a few books now that I've just absolutely loved, and I'm already learning some of these concepts before we even have a child. And this is what this is where I'm so grateful for technology and the internet and podcasts and things, because I am going into parenthood having some idea of what we are aligned with right now.
Yep.
And this is the opportunity. It's easier than ever to see the drastic swing from one end of the spectrum to the other. And this isn't the answer. I've said that multiple times. The answer lies somewhere in the middle, not too much, not too little. And we have many more and free resources to learn about whatever we want and make corrections where needed.
Yeah. I've talked about this with friends as we have this conversation around, and their parents, and around like, okay, we don't want to abuse our children, obviously, but we also don't want them so soft and gentle that they get crushed by the world, because you leave the home and it can be a scary place out there, right? But I look at this not unlike I look at the gym or training for athletics. If you don't train, and what is training? Training is literally tearing the muscle fibers on a small enough scale, or on a large enough scale, that it signals to the brain repair and grow and improve, but not so significant that it becomes traumatic and the whole system shuts down due to injury.
Yeah.
And so training is this environment of sort of like micro repair activities, so that you can step out into the space of real performance through the game, the sport, on the court or in the field or whatever, and you're able to withstand a little pressure. And there is a critical component to that in parenting, I believe, as well. You don't want to injure your child, obviously, but you do want to support them developing the musculature to be able to withstand pressure in the real world.
And frustration.
And a host of different things.
Yeah. No, beautifully put. And so on that note, it lies on us. This is one of those things where you have no excuses not to engage and not to learn even before you become parents. And then even if you are a parent right now, engage, learn, choose to educate yourself with a variety of different modalities. You have podcasts. An example here is Huberman Lab. It's one of our favorites. And this is like a freaking college class. I cannot believe that this information is free.
It's amazing. I have such a man crush on him.
I know you do. It's cute to witness. He's one of the smartest people ever, like on the planet, probably. And the most well-read, the most researched, but he's very moderate. And so anyone who has watched Andrew Huberman knows that, but this is like a freaking college class. So this should not be free, but it is. Audiobooks, they're not necessarily free, but you can learn on the go. And even with your partner, you go on a road trip, pop an audiobook on and listen to a parenting book together, and stop every chapter and talk about it and see what works for you and what could, be in alignment with your values and so on. I think social media, for sure, the accounts that you follow, online communities. There are great online communities for parents out there. This is not something where I'm going to refrain from being a part of a community if I feel like I want to and need to. Like Dr. Becky Kennedy is a great teacher in this space when it comes to child-parent relationships. She was on Andrew Huberman's lab.
Highly recommend that episode.
Yeah, Andrew Huberman lab. Recently within the last couple months, and she is just amazing. She has a book and a podcast that I highly recommend. And then there are all types of online courses, so, the tools are there. And we just need to understand how to use them effectively to build our own arsenal of tools and maybe not subscribe to just one technique or one line of thinking when it comes to something as important as parenting, especially because your child is different than other people's children and they might need some individuation. So there you go. There's the challenge and opportunity with childhood and parenting.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, super, super relevant. And there'll be a lot of things as millennials step into this adult age that we'll be parenting. And so even if it's not a direct relationship to your kid and you choose not to have kids, there's so many spaces where you will be a parental figure or have a parental theme in your life where these opportunities will present themselves.
Yeah, and we will definitely have an episode or more, probably multiple coming up when we're actually parents, talking to people like Dr. Becky or Dr. Shafali, these people who are in the conscious parenting space.
We are open to recommendations and introductions, by the way, anybody listening.
Yep, absolutely.
The last one, and we'll make this pretty quick, it's pretty self-explanatory if you're paying attention at all, is the challenge and opportunity in politics and leadership in our communities. And the challenge in what seems like the most divisive time in United States history ever. I don't know. Maybe the Civil War
I was going to say
worse.
Probably second to the Civil War.
The two-party political system is antiquated and not working.
Clearly.
Even if we have another 4 years with 80-year-olds in leadership positions, what can millennials do to provide another way and another step forward for positions of leadership within our communities and places that we call home? What can we do? In politics, it feels pretty powerless for millennials. I'm not going to go into all of the reasons why it feels powerless, nor am I going to charge up a conversation around Trump versus Biden. But what I see as an opportunity to keep this short and sweet is that there are many that nobody wants to talk about. Mainstream doesn't want to talk about it. Our parents' generation doesn't want to talk about it, but there are many who are politically homeless, who haven't given a shit about politics in our 20s, definitely not in our teens, and even early parts of our 30s, who are now realizing with the current state of the world that something has to change. And I'm uninterested in being a Republican and I'm uninterested in being a Democrat. But how do I get involved? And this is the opportunity. This is where we get to create and support a parallel structure of political leadership. Whether we want to take up the mantle ourselves or whether we want to find the groups that have already started and are groundbreaking some really beautiful ideas that integrate a lot of the opportunities that we've already talked about today. So how can we focus on what we can control in our own communities? And I think it starts locally. It starts with cleaning up our families. Can you be a leader in your own family?
It really does start with the family.
Can you be a leader in your own community? Can you step outside of the comfort zone that we've curated for our modern 2024 life? That's everything from the comfort of our own seats to the world that we can live in with inside of our devices if we would like, and actually step out into the fresh air and meet other human beings who have other ideas for life and cooperate and collaborate in a way that fosters something that can actually impact the collective positively instead of one direction or another. I assure you, and I'm not even a fucking political expert, that if all we ever do is go from left to right, we will not make any progress. There is no forward progress when you are swinging left and swinging right.
In fact, I think it equates to the opposite. I think it's regressive.
Right.
If we're talking about humanity thriving.
Right. And so while I think that this upcoming election is important and that there's a particular candidate that's going to take some effort, but I believe that has so many better options and ideas than Trump or Biden, and that is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and we'll be doing a podcast about him upcoming. I think that you don't have to wait for the election, nor do you have to be overly disappointed by the outcome of the election, because there's opportunities available now. And that, like I said, starts hyper local. You don't have to exist in mainstream politics. You don't. If you want to create an alternative structure altogether, excellent. It can even be business. Businesses can shatter the way that the world works and can change policy. All I'm saying is stepping into leadership in your communities.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what kind of leader am I? There's a diverse array of leadership qualities. It does not have to look like George Washington. It can look very different. You don't have to say a damn word. You can be a servant leader. Christ was a servant leader. Gandhi showed up. He didn't use words as much as he took action. And I think that there are so many opportunities for leadership broadly used that actually will contribute to a better way of living through politics and crafting a world that we want to be a part of. And so the opportunity here is, how do we take the obvious huge population of people who are unhappy with the system and create something that is better and more compelling?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's an ongoing effort. There's not one solution. I think something that is additive to that very beautiful articulation that you just laid out is people being lit up by what they're doing on a daily basis, following their dream, having a dream, not only for yourself, but also within your family, within your, romantic partnership. What is your dream together? Are you working towards something? Because if we don't have a dream, goal, or objective, thank you, Paul Check, we are going to be participating in someone else's dream, goal, or objective. So if that is step 1 through 10, is putting your effort, finding a dream, goal, or objective, creating that for yourself, creating that for your partnership, and creating that for your family. And then every other value that you invest your time, energy, and money in falls under that big dream, which can change throughout life for sure. But that is so, so, so important. But, you're not going to hear that from the right or the left. You might hear it from RFK Jr., honestly, because he is so different than any other politician that I've ever heard or listened to. But that is absolutely of utmost importance for all of us to contribute to a more beautiful world.
No doubt. Well put, my love.
Thank you.
All right, that is our 5 challenges and opportunities. I'll recap quickly. We talked about the challenge of tech and social media. We talked about the challenge of the current health and wellness environment. We talked about the economy and the financial situation that millennials are finding themselves in, as well as taking our childhood experiences and integrating them into a balanced approach to parenting and adulthood, as well as our political and leadership environment. How do we craft the parallel structure, the parallel world for leadership that we want to be a part of and into the future? Guys, this is not an all-inclusive list. In fact, we had a lot of others that we didn't sneak into these 5 because we're already at an hour and a half. But if you have your own thoughts, we would love to hear it. We might even do a part 2. Let us know in the YouTube comments what you thought of these 5, if there are any that come up for you, and whether you would want a part 2 to this episode. You can find all of our episodes on YouTube. Even if you're an audio-only listener, definitely follow us on YouTube, subscribe, and let us know what you thought of the episode in the episode comments. That has ended up being the best way for you to engage on an episode-by-episode basis.
We read all the comments, and so that's the best place for you guys to, chime in with what you want to hear more of. Of course, you can always DM us, but YouTube is the best place to give your feedback. And also, when we are crafting episodes, we always look at YouTube comments. So follow us, subscribe there, and we would love to hear what you thought of the episode.
Definitely. Yeah. Share the episode if that feels authentic. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Check the show notes for any links, anything we talked about. And we will talk to you next time. Go spread some light. Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening.
If you enjoyed that, check out right over here for some more fun clips.
Oh, and you're going to want to subscribe.
Bye.